Ever wonder what secrets lie hidden behind the curtain of our everyday reality? Today, I'm diving into a mystery so bizarre, so utterly mind-bending, that you won't believe your eyes until the very end. Stay tuned as we unravel clues and expose shocking truths that will challenge everything you thought you knew. I bet you've never seen anything like this before. Now, before we go any further, drop a comment below telling me where are you watching from, and if you're hungry for more astonishing revelations, hit that subscribe button right now and join our amazing community. Don't miss out. In the fading light of a war-torn autumn, the murmur of distant cannonades and the weeping wind through barren fields set the stage for a tale that would haunt generations. The American Revolutionary War had scarred the land, not only in flesh and bone but also in spirit. Amid the chaos and bloodshed, an event occurred that would seed a legend, a curse that lingered like a ghost over the quiet valleys and shadowed woodlands of the Hudson Valley. This is the real story behind the Headless Horseman, a story of honor, betrayal, and eternal sorrow that predates the fabled account penned by Washington Irving. Wilhelm was born under the ashen skies of a small German village in the late 1000s, 750s. His childhood was marked by the rigors of rural life, tempered by the stories of valor and loss passed down by his forefathers. As a boy, Wilhelm would sit by the hearth, eyes wide with wonder as elders recounted ancient legends of heroes and specters. In those stories, the line between mortal fate and supernatural destiny blurred, a line that, unbeknownst to him, he was destined to cross. At the age of 17, driven by both a desire for adventure and the necessity to support his struggling family, Wilhelm enlisted as a soldier. His early years in the military were spent on distant battlefields far from home, where he learned the grim arts of combat and survival. Despite his stoic demeanor, whispers of a compassionate heart and a deep-seated sense of justice set him apart from his peers. However, the world he entered was one where ideals were often sacrificed on the altar of ambition and the cruelty of war. His service took him across many lands, through the sprawling fields of Europe and the grim fortresses of empires. Each battle left its mark upon him, not only in scars but in the quiet moments when he would gaze at the horizon, wondering about the cost of human strife. In letters sent back home, Wilhelm recounted his experiences with both candor and regret. He spoke of the bonds formed in bloodshed, of the camaraderie between men from diverse lands, and of the profound loneliness that followed him even in the midst of a noisy encampment. Yet, even as he fought valiantly for his regiment, Wilhelm's heart ached for something more, a redemption from a past that he could neither forget nor entirely understand. This internal conflict would later manifest in the most tragic twist of his fate. The year was 1781, and the American Revolution was nearing its turbulent climax. In the dense forests near the banks of Cold Creek, a critical engagement was set to take place. The American rebels, driven by a fervor for liberty and a desperate need to break the grip of British forces and their hired Hessian mercenaries, prepared for a confrontation that would decide the course of history in that region. Wilhelm, now a seasoned soldier with hardened resolve, found himself embroiled in this fierce conflict. His regiment, a motley collection of battle-hardened men and reluctant volunteers, advanced cautiously through the thick underbrush. The air was heavy with anticipation and the metallic tang of impending violence. For Wilhelm, the battlefield was both a stage for heroism and a theater of unspeakable horrors. As the fighting broke out in earnest, the din of musket fire and the roar of cannons drowned out the whispers of nature. Amidst this chaos, Wilhelm led his comrades with a combination of strategic acumen and unyielding courage. The clash was brutal and unforgiving, a maelstrom of smoke, blood, and shouts that blurred the lines between life and death. Then, in a moment of calamitous fortune, a cannonball, a merciless harbinger from the Patriot artillery, sliced through the air. In an instant that seemed to stretch into eternity, it struck Wilhelm squarely, severing the very crown of his existence. His head was blown from his body in a savage display of war's cruelty. Yet, as his lifeblood mingled with the muddy creek, something far more eerie began to take shape. Witnesses would later say that in the ensuing silence, time itself seemed to pause, as if the very soul of the battlefield recoiled from what had transpired. The battlefield fell into a momentary stillness. The men around him, frozen in shock, beheld the sight of a fallen hero whose demise was as sudden as it was gruesome. Wilhelm's body lay limp, yet his eyes, wide with a strange, unfulfilled yearning, seemed to gaze into realms unseen. In that tragic moment, an ancient curse, one born of the restless spirits of war and betrayed honor, was inadvertently cast upon him. As news of the gruesome event spread, the local populace whispered of a curse that had been unleashed upon the land. Legends began to form in hushed tones around campfires and in the quiet corners of village taverns. It was said that Wilhelm, having been unjustly stripped of his head, was doomed to wander the night in a spectral form, seeking the lost crown that defined his very identity. The very act of decapitation, viewed in the old superstitions as a severance of soul from body, had condemned him to a restless existence. A local wise woman, known among the villagers as Marta the Seer, took a particular interest in Wilhelm's fate. With deep-set eyes and a gaze that pierced the veil between worlds, she claimed to have seen the spirit of the fallen soldier in her dreams. "The man you call a soldier was once a man of honor," she murmured to anyone who would listen, "but the violence of this world has left his soul incomplete, doomed to an eternity of sorrow and aimless wandering." The curse that befell Wilhelm was unlike any other. It was as if the very injustice of his violent end had imbued him with a desire for restitution, a desperate need to reclaim that which defined his mortal self. The local folklore grew to include vivid details. Wilhelm's spirit, headless and sorrowful, rode through the night seeking his missing head. Some believed that his ghost was a portent of doom, foretelling further calamity. Others saw in him a tragic figure, caught between the world of the living and the eternal night. Despite the mounting evidence of supernatural happenings, many remained unconvinced that these tales were more than mere superstition. Yet the legend of the Headless Horseman continued to spread, taking root in the collective imagination and evolving with each retelling. For in the twilight between fact and myth, the truth of Wilhelm's curse was as tangible as the chill that descended on the valley with each passing night. In the months and years that followed the fateful battle at Cold Creek, the specter of Wilhelm became an ever-present enigma. By day, the valley slowly healed its wounds. The fresh scars of battle were covered by the green of spring and the golden hues of autumn. But as night fell, the land was awash with stories of a rider without a head, roaming the darkened paths in a relentless quest for what he had lost. Local witnesses recounted encounters with the spectral soldier in vivid detail. In one such account, an elderly farmer named Tobias described how, on a moonlit evening, he heard the distant clatter of hooves approaching his modest farmhouse. Peering through the window, he saw a lone figure on horseback galloping along the lane. "It was as if the night itself had come alive," Tobias later recalled. "I could feel the sorrow in his gait, the eternal search in his stride. I knew then that it was the spirit of the man from Cold Creek." These nocturnal appearances stirred both terror and sympathy among the villagers. Some daring souls ventured out to catch a glimpse of the ghostly rider, hoping to unravel the mystery of his curse. Among them was a young schoolteacher named Elisa, whose inquisitive nature drove her to document every detail of the eerie encounters. Elisa, who had grown up on tales of old, saw in Wilhelm's wandering spirit not merely a harbinger of dread but also a symbol of the tragic cost of war and the loss of identity that accompanies unbridled violence. As Elisa delved deeper into the folklore, she discovered that Wilhelm's story resonated with ancient traditions of the headless in many cultures, figures that embodied the consequences of injustice and the disruption of the natural order. She learned that the head, in many ancient beliefs, was not only the seat of intellect and identity, but also a powerful talisman that connected the soul to the body. Thus, the loss of one's head was not just a physical injury, but a rupture of the very essence of self. Elisa's investigations led her to the archives of a nearby town, where dusty journals and forgotten records chronicled accounts of similar apparitions. The entry spoke of a spectral rider seen throughout the centuries, always emerging at moments of great turmoil. With each piece of evidence, the legend of the Headless Horseman grew richer, intertwining history with myth in a tapestry that defied simple explanation. In her own writings, Elisa began to weave a narrative that was both historical and fantastical, seeking to honor Wilhelm's tragic fate. She wrote of his early life, his valor in battle, and the bitter injustice that had condemned him to eternal unrest. Her work, though initially dismissed as mere folklore, gradually attracted attention from scholars and artists alike, each interpreting the story in their own unique way. Yet despite these diverse perspectives, one truth remained indisputable. The spirit of Wilhelm, the headless soldier, was real, and his sorrow was as enduring as the land itself. As decades passed, the area once known for the brutal battles of the Revolutionary War transformed into a place of quaint charm and quiet mystery. The settlement, eventually dubbed Sleepy Hollow, grew around the legends and superstitions that had taken root in its soil. Its winding roads and ancient trees whispered secrets of the past, and on stormy nights, the locals would often speak in hushed tones of the cursed rider. In Sleepy Hollow, the tale of Wilhelm had become a cautionary fable, a reminder of the past's inescapable grip on the present. The once feared specter was now woven into the very fabric of the town's identity. Some residents claimed that his restless spirit was not an omen of doom, but rather a silent guardian, a tortured soul seeking absolution in the depths of the night. Others, however, viewed his appearances as warnings, dark preludes to misfortune and unexplained tragedies that befell the unsuspecting. Among the town's inhabitants was a reclusive artist named Henry, whose paintings captured the eerie beauty of the surrounding landscape. Henry was fascinated by the legend of the Headless Horseman and dedicated much of his work to depicting the spectral rider in various guises. His canvases were filled with swirling mists, forlorn eyes, and the unmistakable silhouette of a man on horseback, a man whose very absence of a head seemed to evoke the collective grief of a community burdened by its history. Henry's fascination was not merely artistic, it was personal. In his youth, he had lost a dear friend to the ravages of war, and the memory of that loss haunted him like a ghost. In the spectral figure of Wilhelm, he saw a mirror of his own sorrow, a being caught between worlds, forever yearning for what had been lost. His art became a catharsis, a way to give form to the intangible and to forge a connection with the past that could never be fully reconciled. Despite the beauty in these depictions, the true nature of the curse remained an enigma. Some elders of Sleepy Hollow spoke of ancient rites and lost relics that might, if recovered, offer salvation to Wilhelm's tormented soul. Among these relics was an heirloom passed down through generations, a medallion said to have once belonged to a revered mystic who had the power to commune with the spirits of the departed. Legend held that if the medallion were reunited with the rightful symbol of identity, the head of the fallen soldier, the curse might finally be lifted. Driven by both hope and a desire for closure, a small band of villagers, led by Elisa's protégé, a determined young woman named Clara, began a quest to uncover the long-forgotten relic. Their search took them to the dilapidated manor houses of old, through crumbling churches and secret archives hidden beneath the very foundations of Sleepy Hollow. Each clue they discovered added a new layer to the legend, intertwining the fates of the living and the dead in a narrative that was as intricate as it was heartbreaking. The more Clara learned, the more she began to see Wilhelm not as a monster to be feared, but as a man, a soldier caught in the crossfire of history, his identity ripped away in a moment of violence and injustice. She came to understand that the curse was not born of malice, but of the cruel randomness of war, and that the spectral rider was a manifestation of the deep scars left behind when humanity lost its way. One fateful night, as a fierce autumn storm raged over Sleepy Hollow, Clara and her companions gathered near the ancient stone bridge that spanned the Whispering Creek. The medallion, wrapped in faded velvet and inscribed with mysterious runes, lay at the center of their makeshift altar. The air was thick with anticipation and the scent of rain-soaked earth. In that charged moment, they dared to hope that the curse might be undone. As the clock struck midnight, the wind howled through the trees and the first drops of rain began to fall in earnest. The medallion glowed faintly in the dim light, as if imbued with a power older than time itself. Clara, her heart pounding with both fear and determination, stepped forward to recite the incantation that had been preserved in the brittle pages of an ancient manuscript. The words echoed into the night, their syllables twisting and mingling with the storm. In the distance, a solitary figure emerged from the shadows, a rider, cloaked in darkness, mounted upon a steed as spectral and silent as the night. It was Wilhelm, the headless soldier, his form both terrifying and achingly tragic. For a long, agonizing moment, time seemed to slow as the ghostly figure drew near. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, as if the boundary between life and death were about to be torn asunder. Clara's eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and compassion, locked on to the dark void where Wilhelm's head should have been. In that instant, the incantation reached its climax, and the medallion's glow intensified to a brilliant, blinding light. Then, as if compelled by an unseen force, the spectral rider halted before Clara. For the briefest of moments, a palpable stillness reigned, a silence that spoke of resolution and finality. Slowly, with a deliberate and almost mournful grace, Wilhelm's form began to shimmer and waver. The medallion's power coursed through the night, resonating with the sorrow etched into the ghost's very being. In a final, heart-wrenching act of restitution, a luminous image of a head began to materialize above the chest of the headless rider. It was as if the relic, long separated from its owner, was reuniting the fragments of a broken soul. Wilhelm's eyes, now filled with a clarity that transcended mortal suffering, flickered with gratitude and sorrow. The spectral form, which had long been condemned to wander in eternal limbo, seemed at peace for the first time in decades. As the storm began to subside, Wilhelm's spirit, complete and whole, slowly faded into the night, leaving behind only the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft murmur of the creek. In that quiet aftermath, the people of Sleepy Hollow stood in awed silence, knowing that they had witnessed a miracle, a moment when the relentless curse of war and loss was finally given a chance at redemption. Clara, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks, felt a profound sense of closure. She knew that the story of Wilhelm, the headless soldier, would forever be etched into the soul of Sleepy Hollow, a legend born of tragedy, yet redeemed by the enduring power of hope and compassion. Years turned into decades, and decades into centuries, yet the legend of the Headless Horseman continued to captivate the hearts and imaginations of all who dwelt near the old battlefields and ancient woodlands of the Hudson Valley. In the quiet town of Sleepy Hollow, the memory of Wilhelm was interwoven with the everyday life of its residents, a reminder of a time when the cost of war was paid not only in lives lost, but in souls forever scarred. Children grew up hearing the tale at bedtime, a story of a noble soldier whose life was cut short by the ravages of conflict, and whose restless spirit, seeking the wholeness of his identity, became a spectral guardian of the night. The image of the headless rider, his face forever hidden by the void left behind, came to symbolize both the tragedy of war and the hope for reconciliation. Artists, writers, and musicians found inspiration in the story, each adding their own brushstroke to the canvas of legend. In local lore, it was said that on stormy autumn nights, if one listened closely, the soft clatter of hooves and the whisper of a long-forgotten incantation could still be heard echoing through the valley, a reminder that some stories, no matter how steeped in sorrow, are destined to endure. The tale of Wilhelm was told and retold, each generation infusing it with new life, yet always with the same core message, that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can find redemption, and that the bonds between the living and the dead are not so easily severed. Clara's legacy too lived on in the hearts of those who believed that the past was not a chain to bind them but a bridge to understanding. The medallion, now enshrined in the town's modest museum, served as a tangible link to a time when magic and memory intertwined, a silent testament to the power of love, loss, and the enduring hope for absolution. And so, in the hallowed nights of Sleepy Hollow, as the moon cast its silver light over the fields and the woods whispered with secrets of old, the spirit of Wilhelm, once a proud soldier and then a cursed wanderer, was remembered not as a monster, but as a tragic figure whose life, though stolen by the cruelty of war, was ultimately redeemed by the compassion of a community determined to heal its wounds. In the end, the real story behind the Headless Horseman was not merely a tale of horror, but a profound exploration of identity, loss, and the timeless quest for redemption. It was a story that spoke of the eternal struggle between darkness and light, a story that, like the winds that carried the whispers of the past, would forever echo through the corridors of time. Are you ready to unlock the secrets of our world's most enigmatic legends? If today's journey into mystery left you craving more, don't miss a single tale. Subscribe to the Stories of Legends channel and become part of our community that dares to explore the unknown. Hit that subscribe button now, and while you're at it, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Every legend starts with a curious heart. Yours could be the next spark that lights up our next story. Join us and let's write history together, one legend at a time.